Hello, class. This week I looked at newspaper articles having to do with the legacy of the First World War decades after its conclusion. I started with a piece from the Washington Post in 1948 written by Marshall Andrews mentioning the death and burial of General John J. Pershing, who was a war hero from the Great War and led the U.S. to victory. That article mentioned how Pershing was laid to rest facing the graves of 30 men that he led in the war and celebrated his legacy and service to the country while also describing details of his funeral. Next, I found Nelson B. Bell's article in the Washington Post from 1939 talking about a very timely screening of films about World War I, just as World War II was beginning. The article did mention that the films were written and scheduled long before the beginning of the Second World War, but noted that it was very timely that they were coming out at this time. Now, the films they discussed in the article were Thunder Afloat, which was a sort of comedic take on the maritime actions during World War I by the United States, and at the same time, also the more serious story of Nurse Edith Cavell, who was a nurse that treated both Allied and Central-powered troops who were wounded, but was ultimately captured and executed by the German army. So the article touches a little bit on what these screenings meant as yet another global catastrophe approached. And then in 1969, the Baltimore Sun discussed how the U.S. Army at Fort Holabird, which is no longer in use, had canceled a screening of a movie called Oh, What a Lovely War, which of course was about the First World War. Now, the post-adjutant of the base, Captain Raymond C.V. Robinson Jr., claimed that the screening had received a poor preliminary response and based this on an enlisted man's testimony, saying that officers had walked out of the initial screening. But there are some who question that, given the events happening in Vietnam at the time, wonder if the movie could have been seen as discouraging war in general, or could maybe dampen the spirits of the military or the national mood around the Vietnam War. Of course, this is left up to interpretation. It's not outwardly said in the article, but there is some text in the article that leaves one to wonder if this was the case. More recently, from 2008, I found an article by Robert Tate of The Guardian talking about a World Cup qualifier in Yerevan between the Armenian and Turkish teams, which provided for an opportunity for soccer diplomacy 9 decades after World War I came to an end. So the match in Yerevan actually allowed for Armenian President Serge Sarkisian to invite the president of Turkey, Abdullah Gül, at the time for talks about making a closer relationship between the two countries. But it also talked about the nationalist backlash both in Turkey and in Armenia, given the long legacy of the Armenian genocide, which even to this day Turkey still denies. So this particular article was just a testament to how long the legacy of World War I reaches into our own age. Yes, this was in 2008 technically, but even still, there are a lot of ripple effects from the First World War in our modern era. Thank you for joining me today.